Hey everyone, and welcome back. In this module, we're going to take a look at our C++ game mode class and replace the project defaults with a blueprint version for that extra flexibility that we've been talking about. Now, this is going to be one of those super quick, super simple topics. So what I wanted to do before getting to the end of this module and getting all of that into the project, I just wanted to jump over to the C++ class very quickly. And inside of the game mode class file, what I've done is create just a quick example of what we would need to be doing if we were going to set everything up by C++, since we don't have the flexibility of even assigning the default classes in the project. So in a standard project, the most common things that you tend to see, or the other very most common thing that you tend to see a game mode controlling, especially in most single player games, is the player controller. So we can see here that all of this is commented out because we don't have any of these classes, and this would obviously then cause some compilation errors. But as an example, if we were to create a player controller, we'd call it something like a twin stick player controller. And to assign this, we do this the same way as we did with the default pawn class, which is using the static class. Other classes that then maybe not quite as standard, but can be used in a lot of other projects, especially when you start going into more of the multiplayer stuff, is things like the game state and the player state classes. And again, this would be done by creating or assigning the static class of something like an A twin stick game state or an A twin stick player state. So again, just to get three other classes kind of assigned by default, we'd need to do all of this in code. And again, like I've mentioned, if you wanted to test things, if you wanted to try a different game state or a different player controller for different levels, if they were doing different logic inside of them, then you're going to have to keep coming in here, replacing the class which is being called and assigned, and then recompiling and testing and so on. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense why we're going to spend just this little bit of time in Unreal now, back in the editor, to kind of bypass some of this and make this as simple and streamlined as possible. So to begin, I'm just going to create a new folder inside of our project here called Blueprints. Then back inside the twin stick folder, we're just going to right click on the twin stick game mode, select to create a blueprint class based on the C++ class, and I'm going to put this into the blueprints folder, and I'm just going to call this one BP underscore game mode base. You could call this something like game mode twin stick or whatever you wanted based on your naming convention. With that done, this opens up the new blueprint. The first thing we can see to the right-hand side, if you're not familiar with blueprints, if you have only been doing the kind of C++ side of things in development so far, we now have all of these options which are no longer grayed out, which means they're exposed. We can drop these down very quickly, change the default pawn, the default player controller, and so on, like I've discussed. And when you've made the changes in this class, that will also apply the changes in the project, which we'll do in just a second. So I'm just going to compile and save that and go over to the project settings. Inside of here, we're going to go to the maps and modes, and we'll now replace the twin stick game mode by using the dropdown with our BP underscore game mode base. So again, like in the blueprint class, we saw that the options were not grayed out. The same happens here because we're using our blueprint variant. We now have instant access to make the changes that we want to the default classes, to the player controller classes if we had more, directly from our project folder, which means whenever we create a new map now or change levels, all of this will be set by default here. And again, this allows us to very easily come in, pick a different pawn, see how the pawn works in the level. If that doesn't work, come back here without any recompilation or going back to the C++ classes. So for the moment, we don't have our final pawn ready. That's going to be another step we take in future modules. So I'm going to leave this as default at the moment, and we will return here at the end of the project just to tidy things up and kind of see the full flow that will then allow us with our project finished and reworked with the balance of blueprints and C++. So in this module though, we've created a blueprint child class of our game mode for use as the project default game mode. This is going to make it much easier for us to test and update things like the default pawn, player controller, game state, and all of the other classes that you can assign through the game mode.